This is an open letter that will hopefully somehow reach JK Rowling in regards to your open letter about transgender human beings, like me. Dear JK, on June 10th, 2020, you showed strength and bravery by sharing your trauma as a sexual assault survivor. I am so profoundly sorry that, like so many women, you have experienced the inhuman crime against so many facets of your mental and your physical well-being, short-term and long. By speaking from such an immense position of power, you will no doubt inspire others to do the same. And you will, in my view, save lives. I personally cannot imagine how difficult this was to survive or to share. Thank you. In the very same essay, you also started an important conversation about what it means to be transgender. I wish to join that conversation. And I wish to give you exactly what you have asked for in your letter: empathy and understanding. I am sorry. Not in the accepting blame sort of way, but in the this is awful and I wish to share my abundance of compassion with you way of supporting a fellow human being who is in pain. As a mother of 3 daughters, this is something that I often teach and model for them. This is what we all need to learn more deeply. I want you to know that I too have paid close attention to trans and non-binary voices on Twitter and beyond. I have seen horrifying insults from all sides. I've seen harassment and threats, including ones that were directed at you. I stayed silent. I've been silent. And for that, I am sorry. The deplorable attacks that some wield against you and others are completely unacceptable and not at all conducive to meaningful conversation. I have no doubt that this has all been very difficult for you to endure. And as someone with her own medicated mental health challenges, I can empathize with you to some degree. I too have been attacked online for discussing trans issues. I was hurt, damaged, cast into silence and darkness. I knew that a lack of understanding was rippling around the core of it all, but that didn't seem to matter to my emotions. And I suspect you know exactly what I mean by that. So let us talk a little bit about understanding, shall we? First, a disclosure, one that I offer willingly and openly, and for the first time, to a world that often asks or demands people like me to discuss. I am a woman that has a penis. It has been there since I was a fetus. And while that is less common in women than having a vagina, it is still perfectly normal. I'm one of the different types of females that are out there. Sadly, like countless other women, I will never know what it is like to have a life growing inside of me. And yes, many, and more this week than last, will continue to think of me as nothing more than a man in a dress, or worse, some kind of predator. I, like you, am also a teacher. Present tense for both of us, even if your educating has extended far, far beyond classroom walls. I explore elective subjects like law, world issues, and family dynamics with teenagers, most of whom share our curiosity and compassion for people beyond our borders and life experiences. For the past 3 years, I have been Ms. McKim to hundreds of students and members of our school's Gender Sexuality Alliance, our GSA, which I facilitate, along with some exceptional young human beings. But I know that I have secretly been Mr. McKim to many. Your open letter makes it clear that you are firmly in favor of the latter. And while I would never presume to speak on behalf of all trans people, I do wish to speak with you, teacher to teacher, out of a shared desire to do and say what is best for children. I believe your heart is in the right place, that you do care. I want to speak about women like you and women like me and humanity in general. So, teacher, will you learn with me, as I have just learned from you in your letter? You know, I think one of the biggest barriers to understanding is a lack of agreement on the definition of important words. We see this everywhere. You know, what we think we're saying, what the other person hears, and what the word actually means are often 3 very different things. Like any good teacher, I wish to investigate a few of them in point form. And I'll be using more than one source. So, first, bigot. Powerful word. Oxford defines it as a person who is intolerant towards those holding different opinions. Merriam-Webster says it is a person who is obstinately or intolerantly devoted to his or her own opinions and prejudices, especially one who regards or treats the members of a group, such as a racial or ethnic group, with hatred and intolerance. Now, in your open letter, you refer to this as a slur, and I get that. So for the first time, I looked it up. Admittedly, I have used this word to refer to people who think that my gay friends should not have been allowed to marry or to adopt or to visit each other in the hospital when they are sick. Now, after reviewing these definitions, I now understand this word to be far broader than I assumed. It seems rooted in a lack of openness to learning, which is antithetical to education. So at present, I wonder if you and I are both so devoted to our opinions as to be considered bigots. I don't know. But since the word has so much power wrapped around it, it shuts down conversations. I'll try harder to be anything but the definition of a close-minded bigot. And I will listen. Will you join me? Definition number 2, biology. Oxford defines this as the study of living organisms, divided into many specialized fields that cover their morphology, physiology, anatomy, behavior, origin, and distribution. Merriam-Webster adds that it is a branch of knowledge that deals with living organisms and vital processes. Since I did not take biology in high school, that was quite informative to me. So here, too, we find the root of what might simply be called understandable misunderstandings, if you will. Schools and societies keep human biology pretty simple. You know, boys have penises, girls have vaginas. End of story. And with the exception of a handful of classes that are out there now doing great work, we all learned this from a teacher and a textbook that we trusted. But is that really the extent of gender? Do I have more vital processes going on inside my body? Or is it just the penis that matters? See, on this, the evidence is clear. Harvard University, Scientific American, Nature, Psychology Today, and countless other sources and shared, trusted organizations have found that in multiple ways, trans brains align more closely to their experienced gender, not the one that they were assigned at birth. Is my brain not part of my biology? What about my soul? What about my chromosomes, which are unknown to most of us? And did you know that some people are XXXY or XXXY, XYY? I mean, what does that mean? How soon can it be studied further? Aren't you curious? I am. Oh, and also, I would love to know why my 6'2" male body features hands that are about the same size as my 13-year-old daughter's. Can you please get on that too, science? But Alice, you have male hormones. Well, that's what we are inaccurately calling them, then what do you? We all have estrogen and testosterone, many more hormones going on in here to an extraordinarily diverse degree. Simply put, an unknown but powerful combination of my hidden vital processes are apparently female. Always have been. Ergo, my body, my mind, biologically female. Third definition, research. So Oxford says this is the systematic investigation into and study of materials and sources in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions. Merriam-Webster says it's careful or diligent search, studious inquiry or examination, especially investigation or experimentation, aimed at the discovery and interpretation of facts, revision of accepted theories or laws in the light of new facts, or practical application of such new or revised theories or laws. It's a long one. It also adds it's the collecting of information about a particular subject. Strange to read definitions. That's something I typically would do with students. So speaking of that, JK, you know, with respect, if one of my students wrote, "I'm also aware through extensive research," instead of pointing me to a study, a university, peer-reviewed journal, that student would not be getting an A. And I want to know where is your systematic investigation? Why has it not led us to any biologists? How can you say that you have deep concerns about the effect of the trans rights movement on children, and then reference the opinion of only one psychiatrist from Tavistock Clinic. You know, if you really want to be persuasive, you need data and respected sources. So let me try. So according to a major study of more than 20,000 trans individuals published in January of this year in the journal Pediatrics, individuals who received puberty blockers during adolescence have a lower risk of suicidal thoughts than those who wanted the medication but couldn't access them. Quote, these results align with past literature suggesting that pubertal suppression for transgender adolescents who want this treatment is associated with favorable mental health outcomes. This is what the study says. You know, contrary to popular conspiracy theories, these puberty blockers are a type of pause that any person, should they wish to, and those numbers are pretty small, could stop. Some like to say that it's irreversible. That's false. So the findings of this study suggest that affirming healthcare for young people could help reduce the trans community's disproportionate risk of suicide. This is what the medical professionals are saying all across the world. I suspect you know this because you didn't point us to any. Yeah, those stats, and I hate to share them. I do, but I'm going to do it anyway. And I'm going to use a 2018 study of teenagers done by the American Academy of Pediatrics. They found that for trans males, more than half made a suicide attempt. 29.9% for trans females, and 41.8% for non-binary human beings. The author of that first study, the lead author, I should say, because it wasn't just one person with opinions. His name is Dr. Jack Turbin. He's a resident psychiatrist at the Harvard Medical School. And the findings add, in his words, to the quote, growing evidence base suggesting that gender-affirming medical care for transgender youth is associated with superior mental health outcomes. He continues, it certainly argues against the misguided notion that gender-affirming care is inherently harmful and should be legislatively banned. He's referring actually to a number of recently introduced bills in the United States that seek to limit care for trans and non-binary youth. In fact, just a few days after you wrote your letter, the administration in the United States has in fact passed new rules that will allow for someone like me to be turned away from a hospital, not only for gender affirming care or transition, but for other health conditions as well. Freedom. So some of those laws, to go back to that, would actually see the doctor prosecuted in a court of law simply for following the best evidence for what to do in order to help their patient. So I ask you, which side is boosted by your letter, JK? Is it science or fear? More life, more death? Because major medical organizations like the American Academy of Pediatrics, the Endocrine Society, and the Canadian Psychiatric Association, which is where I'm from, have already decided on this, and so many others. Oh, and they've also decided that conversion therapy, the really, really bad idea. That's even illegal in some places. Soon will be in Canada. Hey, side note, did you know that your pseudonym for your crime novels, Robert Galbraith, is shared by a 20th century father of conversion therapy, Robert Galbraith Heath? That's weird. Apparently he cured a gay person once and got a bit famous. It's true. He implanted electrodes into the gay man's brain, showed him heterosexual pornography, and claimed that he converted him to heterosexuality when he made him have sex with a female sex worker. That's quite a name coincidence. Right, back to definition 3, research, exploring the definition of it. So, to be quite honest, I had Sarah Palin flashbacks when you wrote that, you know, the extent of your research was to followed online discourse, read sundry books, blogs, and articles by trans people. I had to look up sundry too, just means many, hence the Sarah Palin reference. And you referenced the people that you have met. My understanding is that on Twitter, you only follow people who share your point of view. And to be clear, there are plenty of trans women who might share some of your points of view. But more on that later. So you go on to decry the first rule of Twitter, as you call it, to never ever expect a nuanced conversation. But then, at long last, after many, many months of questions and denials and publicist statements about you having senior moments, like a particular tweet, you emerge, you know, as this powerful voice for what you say are many millions of women whose sole crime is wanting their concerns to be heard, end quote. But then you avoid that kind of nuance that you claim to be seeking. I mean, my goodness, you accurately, you know, I think, I lack the evidence, but I'm pretty confident here, as are you. You call our attention to women being denigrated and dehumanized to an extent we have never seen. And I think that's true. Then you point to Donald Trump's sexual assault bragging, the incel movement's sex begging, and trans activists as your third exemplar? I mean, really? You know, you're cherry picking of horrifying anecdotes featuring some trans activists, you know, never bothers to differentiate between those who, for whatever reason, scream out in anger or pain, fear, or simply they're trying to save trans lives from mocking and murder. And they use a spectrum of strategies. Now, some are disagreeable, meaning you and maybe I don't agree with their views, and you know, this hurts your feelings. Runs contrary to how you see the world, how you see women. Some, as you point out in your letter accurately, are using harassment or threats as their weapons of choice. And in my view, they should be kicked or suspended from the platform, or worse. I mean, we're talking about crimes here. How dare they? You know, I've seen on Twitter this week, you know, people suggesting that, you know, the trans community isn't saying enough about these things. You know, I don't know if that's true. I don't think so, but you know, I for one want to say, No one deserves that. You don't deserve that. It doesn't help anything. But linking those three exemplars in the minds of your readers, the children who hang on your every word, I was stunned, frankly. Stunned. So given that your research avoided science in favor of your own echo chambers, I am not surprised that you also edited the full story behind the backlash that you have faced online. First, your absent-minded like of a tweet that called a trans woman a man in a dress. In fact, calling trans women, like me, men in dresses, was not, as you say to inflame the situation, a crime. And I want you to know it was really hurtful. It's really hurtful. As in, a lot of your fans experienced serious pain over that. As in, depression intensified for who knows how many. You know, there are few, if any, words that can send my trans students into psychological meltdown and anxiety attack, depression, like being intentionally misgendered or mocked for the way we dress or speak or look. You know, we are not all as self-assured or safe or surrounded by supportive friends like you may be, and you know, I think I am. Then you cherry pick one of your allies who thinks much as you do, who tragically was dying of cancer. You mentioned that you picked, you know, that one ally. Why? You're trying to suggest that her views should be insulated from criticism on the basis of her illness? I mean, if I were ever to be so tragically sick, I would be furious to see someone use it as armor to shield my public views from respectful discourse. This is the public space. Obviously, harassment and threats have no place. And anybody who attacked her in that way, shame on you. But JK, what are you doing in this letter? Finally, you write that people who believe themselves to be good, kind, progressive people swarmed back into your timeline when you only returned to Twitter because you wanted to share a free children's book during the pandemic. Which is kind of cool to do that. But what you leave out is that you accidentally copy pasted yet another example of misgendering, put it into one of your tweets promoting the book. And I get that accidents happen, but did you expect fans and citizens who would hope for more to stay silent? Was it to make all trans activists look like people who attack you no matter what you post? Was this really an accident? Should the words of someone who takes such liberties with their summaries and with the data be trusted? Probably should have turned that phone off. And I'm going to do a little adjustment because I like it when my bangs are lower, and we trans women get to do that. So back to a few more thank yous, actually, which I hope you'll see as genuine despite all that I have said to you, written to you already. And you, like me, since you've spent countless hours online attempting to sift through all the misinformation and the misguided voices and barely imaginable emotional and physical anguish. You know that I might receive my own backlash for some of the statements that I'm going to make. Again, I want you and anyone else reading this, listening to this, to understand that I do not and never will speak for all trans people. There are as many varieties and experiences of gender as there are people in the world. That's what a spectrum means, of course. Science. First, thank you. I want to thank you for the Harry Potter series. They're still my favorite books of all time. That alone may be cause for me to be criticized. I know this all might seem irrelevant right now, but it isn't for me because, for years you made me laugh, you made me cry, you made me cheer. You made me think and act a bit more like Hermione Granger, social justice warrior who fought against the enslavement of elves. So, seriously, why the accepted slavery? Thinking a lot about that lately in the first place. You made me better at forgiving people. People like Draco Malfoy, the indoctrinated child soldier. You made me consider love as this kind of universal force that transcends even death. You helped this one-time atheist finally seek and feel her soul. You were one of the people that led me in that direction. And that's how I discovered my true gender. I didn't read a lot about the afterlife. Thanks for that. I discovered my true gender and separate soul from body. Maybe first to run from this body, and then in my case to run back to it. That makes me think about this one quote from the last book. It's one of the last times Albus Dumbledore ever speaks to Harry. And spoiler alert, it's from the afterlife. And he said, when Harry asked, "Is this real? Am I really here? Is this all just happening inside my head?" And Dumbledore responds, "Of course it is happening inside your head, Harry. But why on earth should that mean it is not real?" I think back to him thinking he was supposed to be in Slytherin because the Sorting Hat originally thought he would do well there. But Harry, of course, is not Slytherin, because his soul was not Slytherin. Sorting Hat knew that. I just think those are two interesting parts of the books that I wanted to mention. I want to thank you for telling my kids and children everywhere that the greatest wizard of all time is a gay man. Yeah. It would have been nice to have a gay person actually mentioned in one of the 7 books, but yeah, I know a lot of people over the decades have not been doing that, and that needs to change. But at least you mentioned it later, and I thought it was kind of cool. We desperately need representation in youth culture, and with this one act, you likely saved the lives of who knows how many gay or lesbian kids who had never seen themselves in any books or movies before. I read every one of your books to my oldest daughter. Those are some of my most cherished memories, and hers. Those are locked away. Those are safe. No matter what you or anyone else says or does next. Or to quote Daniel Radcliffe's powerful response to you this week, he wrote, "It's clear that we need to do more to support transgender and non-binary people, not invalidate their identities and not cause further harm." He said, "To all the people who now feel that their experience of the books has been tarnished or diminished, I am deeply sorry for the pain these comments have caused you. And if you found anything in these stories that resonated with you and helped you at a time in your life, then that is between you and the book you read, and that is sacred." Thank you, Daniel. I needed that. And not everybody has to agree with me that your books are still great. You know, one of my 11-year-old twins just finished them too. So we talk about them often. There's so many lessons to explore. You know, it's not perfect. I've talked to them about enslaved elves. Good thing to talk about. But there's so many good lessons in there. Her identical twin is starting book 5. You know, I always meant to send you these thanks. I regret that they're now coming wrapped in all of this conflict. But we Gryffindors, we don't run from such challenges, do we? We risk the ire of one group of people when we agree that nobody should be calling you Voldemort. And I will endure the fury from another group of people when I say, with full understanding of this slur's power, that I felt like you were calling me and all of my fellow trans and non-binary people of the rainbow mudbloods. Nobody expected me to be a female after a doctor first looked between my legs and seemed to know so much about me already. Least of all me, actually, until I was, in my late 30s. And it's not really a question that any male growing up in the 80s and 90s would really ask themselves. It's not a term that we even knew. That's why education is so important. It's also incidentally why we are seeing more trans and non-binary people living their truth and being visible. You talk about it as groupthink, but really, the world is just becoming more accepting, more knowledgeable, safer. In many places, anyway. You helping with that? Yeah, it's not really a question that I ever asked myself, and nothing seemed off because I happen to be attracted to females. People used to say, "Is he gay?" All the time. My ex-mother-in-law, all the time. Imagine my surprise to one day discover that she was right, just not in the way that so many people expect. Here I stand, or sit, in defiance of gatekeepers, a biological woman. Maybe not a pure blood by some people's standards, but I am performing magic all the same. I belong. Next, thank you. Thank you for arguing that sex is determined by biology. Everybody's throwing this out there, saying that they're not linked. But as I said before, I invite you and any other readers to investigate things like neuroplasticity, the depth of transgender research, what is sadly still missing from transgender research, chromosomes and hormone research, the countless interactions in the body that we haven't even completely understood yet. Did you know that our cells are constantly dying and being reborn throughout our lives, burning down and rising up like a phoenix, like me? I'm also very interested in the immortal jellyfish, which restarts its life and it just keeps going. Doesn't change genders. Neither is phoenix, but is reborn. This doesn't make being trans or gay or non-binary a choice. Again, see science. Yeah, also it doesn't mean that we become trans or need to present you with some kind of biological proof that we are who we are. Your suggestion to the contrary is a not so subtle invitation to conversion therapy, which is happening in households all around the world. Robert, it's one of the most devastating tortures ever be inflicted on young people. For me, I know that there has never been a change of gender. Struggles of my past, things that I remember, things that people said, not knowing who I was, I understand those things now. And when I finally did, my cruel anxiety levels, they were cut in half. It was this one-time atheist finally simultaneously awoke to my gender and my soul. And you know what's ironic? It's ironic how many Christians prefer to judge me based on my external body instead of my internal spirit. Didn't Jesus say that kingdom of heaven lies within? Didn't Buddha tell you to look in the same place too? Ancient communities, First Nations peoples, look within. Anyway, the other half of my anxiety was still there, and it was left to walk and wade and fall and march through this hurricane of transphobia until SSRIs finally helped me to quiet the noise, to find center. Thank you, science. Another word, transphobia. It's a broad term that you treat like a slur, when in fact, we all suffer from it, all of us. It's called internalized transphobia, and it was put there by Ace Ventura, Silence of the Lambs, books like Robert Galbraith's The Cuckoo's Calling, Chandler Bing from Friends, who would say he could throw up just at the thought of seeing his father. Some of my male friends, some of everybody's friends, textbooks, Republicans, stand-up comedians, misunderstandings, and now, for many, another source of internalized transphobia or external. You. I think I have finally fought through most of my transphobic internal shit pile dumped there by society and media, but it took time, effort, real research, and the fierce bravery of trans men, women who took to the stage long before I raised my hand in the crowd and started asking people to stop throwing their rotting fruit and start listening instead. Thank you, Jamie Clayton from Sense8. Thank you, Wachowski sisters. Thank you, Nicole Maines, aka Dreamer from the sensational show Supergirl. She's a trans superhero / alien whose internal powers pass down only through the female line. I thought that was an extraordinary touch, something that happens when you actually consult the trans person when you are writing their role. So thank you, Nicole. Kids and I love your show. Above all, thank you to every trans activist who may have lost their livelihoods and their lives because they stood early and they stood tall and they stand still unless someone cuts them down. From Marsha P. Johnson at Stonewall, through the Black trans women who are fighting and dying for the right to exist in America today and elsewhere. I would not be here and I would not be a happy person without them, without you. JK, you dishonor their legacy when you so carelessly or strategically paint a whole group of activists with the same brush. This is not acceptable. This is never acceptable. Are you better than this? I thought so. This next thank you is a stretch, I'll be honest, but I'm going to attempt it anyway. And like so many people right now, I'm looking out into the world and trying my best to answer the question that is on all of our lips. What is wrong with this world? Unlike most people, however, it is my job, my paid job, to dive deep into these issues, discuss possible root causes with young people. You know, after all, we are unloading so many disasters atop their anxiety-riddled heads. Now, how do I explain George Floyd and all cops are bad and systemic racism to my children? To be honest, one of the things that really disturbs me about your open letter is the timing of it. Why did you feel the need to post your persuasive essay now? The world is laser focused on the violent suppression of Black, Indigenous, and people of color. It just doesn't seem to matter. You know, their lives don't seem to matter as much as white people do to those in power. That's this moment. Do trans people also suffer from oppression? Yeah. And it's counting costless lives. Countless lives. Again, see science. Did we want to be forced to respond to someone of your incalculable power at this moment in history? No. I mean, at least I didn't. But here I am. Telling my story for the first time. Recording, you know, myself talk about this for the first time. Standing up for my students, myself, for the world that I want to help make, or my presumed to be daughters. They're pretty sure. I often wonder if that's why so many people fear the truth of my existence, because we expose the small but not insignificant chance that their sons are actually their daughters. And this scares people. And that's why the word phobia is used. It doesn't have to be a slur. We have to start acknowledging where the fear is coming from. Right. I'm still not at that. Thank you. That stretch. Thank you. So thank you for bringing our attention to one of the root causes for so much of the hostility present in the United States or around the world. In your letter, in the hallways of my school and schools everywhere. And that problem is that fringe radical positions are being used as propaganda to define a whole movement, a whole group of people. It's being used to divide us from each other and from the truth. And that truth is not always present halfway between those two perspectives. That's a whole other problem. But I think it's safe to say, all police officers are not bad people. The system is systemically racist, and obviously we need to do something about that. All protesters are not terrorists, as the President of the United States and dictators everywhere like to say. Actually none of them are terrorists. All who share your concerns, or at least some of them, you're not radical. Really, speaking as a long-term feminist myself, I question if you're even a feminist if you exclude women like me, but there again is the debate, because you don't think I'm a woman. But are you radical when your views are indeed so widespread? I mean, really, I have no idea how many of my colleagues or my family members or my lost friends think as you do. I likely never will know. Just saying she and my name, it doesn't tell me what you really think. All trans activists are not bullies and harassers, despite how you have shamefully painted us. Finally, a strange thank you indeed. Thank you, JK Rowling, and many of your supporters. I mean this in all sincerity, for whatever support you have provided to trans people over the course of your lives. Maybe you spoke up when we were being fired or murdered. Maybe you use our correct pronouns and names, regardless of what you and so many others were privately thinking. Maybe you did that early. Maybe you encouraged other people to do it. Whatever it was, and wherever that trans person was standing or slipping on their own personal journey, wherever you were on your own personal journey, I think back to something I posted on Facebook a few weeks ago that I thought was, extraordinary. And it said, you did the best with who you were at the time. Forgive yourself. Move forward. I'm guessing you and your supporters have helped some trans people. You say you did. And on this, I believe you. Now, I want you to know that I understand your hesitation with taking that next step in learning who we really are. That we are exactly who we say we are. JK, I would never ever argue about your gender. I wouldn't call you non-binary or insist on using they, them pronouns because you felt, as you say, mentally sexless when you were younger, and you mused about how you might have tried to transition if you had been born 30 years later? It's not for me to say. And given that your inner sense of femaleness seems to be so strong, I can imagine that such words would be very hurtful to you. That said, if you ever discover, while searching within, a different reality within yourself, a deeper truth, I, for one, and again, I do not speak for the entire trans community, but I will welcome you under the trans umbrella. Still pretty rainy out here, but I won't judge your journey, which is why I simply cannot understand why you were judging mine. I want to. I do. I really want to understand why you think I and my fellow trans sisters are eroding women. I do not understand. And I want to. I want to know why you feel like women, quote, must accept and admit that there is no material difference between trans women and themselves. I mean, who says something that dumb? For starters, I have that aforementioned penis. So we are materially different. And in conclusion, not even my identical twins are devoid of material differences. Is this just another one of your straw man, boogeyman arguments designed to generate fear and push discourse further to the binary as well? You know, earlier I said you helped teach me some things. And I think the biggest one is that you made me think even more deeply than I ever have before about the long-term trauma and fear that many sexual assault survivors associate with stereotypically male appearances. And those individuals appearing in essential, woefully underfunded safe spaces for women. You know, I obviously disagree, but you know, who might I be angry at someone with such scars and fears, to use your words? You know, honestly, just can't find that anger. I'm surprised by that. Maybe the anti-anxiety pills, maybe the internal work that I've done. You know, I used to be a very angry person. I don't know, I mean, you've suffered. That much is clear. And so have many of the women that you claim to represent. So you passed along some quality education with your letter. Unfortunately, you have also done a lot of damage. I mean, do you get that? That you've done a lot of damage to some of the most vulnerable people in the world? People who you say you want to keep safe? You know, this leads me to a lot of questions, though, which, like any good teacher that I'm trying to be, I'm going to pose to you in hopes that you will one day answer them. Some are painfully personal in nature, but I feel finally strong enough to weather any storm that comes my way. You know, I hope you are too, because you're in that now. You mentioned being in a very dark place inside your head in the days leading up to writing your open letter. I've been there. I've been there too. You said that memories of your assaults are making it hard to contain your anger. I cannot imagine. I'm sorry. Anger is toxic. It is a poison we think we're giving to someone else, but really we're taking it. What I can't imagine though is that reading Trans Women Are Women responses from Emma Watson, Daniel Radcliffe, and Eddie Redmayne, and countless others who, you may be close to, that is taking its toll. I too have lost so many friends and family members over beliefs about who I am on the inside. It's hard. I hope you are caring for yourself right now. I do. I hope you are taking some time to reflect. I hope you're still willing to learn. With these questions, I'm still, despite everything, hoping to learn more from you. You may find some of them challenging. So I invite you to take your time. But I do hope to hear back from you. I don't know whether that's realistic, given that I'm a non-famous trans woman with plenty of privilege, but not that kind of access. Question set number 1. Would you care to elaborate on any scientific sources that you may be using to support your positions? I mean, are there any that you decided to omit in order to hide evidence that didn't support your views? And again, if so, what relevance does that have to your trustworthiness? 2, in your letter, you mention a woman who, quote, used to be a gay man. Now, as some people experience their journey as a transition from one gender to another, it is not my place to question her story if she expresses it to you in that way. No, what interests me most is that you use she pronouns and say that, quote, it's always been hard for you to think of her as anything other than a woman. This leaves me with many questions. What does transition mean to you? I mean, believe me, I understand the confusion that circulates around that world. We hold up the butterfly as a trans symbol and imagine 2 different species. Not like the phoenix. And just last week, I had a discussion with these 2 wonderful, supportive trans experts. They're close friends of mine. We were actually talking about this. I was being open, and like so many, they understand and perpetuate the terminology MTF for male to female, or FTM, female to male. It could be referred to for surgery or for transition. I've heard this plenty of times. I'm female to female. That's been my transition. Oh, and goodness, when I pointed that out, they were so thankful. They weren't punching back and saying I'd called them transphobic. They wanted to know more because they want to help people. Another term, gender reassignment surgery. We don't use that much anymore, but I see it all over the place. Gender confirmation surgery is far more common, but even there, it sounds like that I need to do something to confirm my gender to myself or to others. No, I don't. Do you think that transition can only refer to medical changes? In other words, do you believe that hormones and surgeries can somehow create women or make someone more female? Having personally been harassed by a trans woman, specifically someone who many would call a trans medicalist, who told me that I couldn't be trans without altering my body. I can understand why so many people who, like me, can't or don't take that journey. are actually bullied to suicide by people who are supposed to be trying to stay warm under that same umbrella. That was a hard one for me. Would you identify yourself as a trans medicalist? Now, if you answer yes to that last question, doesn't that mean that becoming a woman is only possible for those with big bank accounts or those living in places that cover such expenses? What does the person you know who you reward with she pronouns say about that access gap? What do you have to say? Yeah, I know you care about issues of equity. While some people suffer from dysphoria, that discontent and pain associated with your body not feeling aligned with who you are, I mean, it's complex. And many find themselves in very dark places. I've been there too, and I want to be crystal clear here. I believe that every possible healthcare support, including surgeries and hormones, should be provided by the state to the siblings of mine who need that. And need is the word. Others, like me, I have this lucky luxury of looking at the pros and cons of medical intervention and choosing, in my case, at present, not to have surgery. I'm a lesbian with a penis, and with great difficulty, I've grown to love that, and yes, enjoy that. My partner. Is it someone else's place to say that that is wrong? The hormone therapy I was prescribed, had a lot of side effects. I was looking forward to a lot of the changes that come with that. But for me, the testosterone that binds to serotonin, the HRT can, and as I said, for me, did lead to deep depression. Which then led to these nagging questions that so many trans people have to transcend, which is, am I trans enough? Am I trans at all? My wife actually has my favorite question for this one, and I'll share it, and maybe it will help someone. But she asked me once on one of my darker days, if you were on a desert island and you knew with 100% certainty you would never be rescued, nobody's ever going to see you again, you are alone, what gender are you? Like, female, obviously. Like, yeah. You're not doing this for other people. Nobody would be doing this for other people. I have made the difficult choice to defer or quite likely deny so many desired bodily changes in return for, in my case, the mental wellness that somehow I was able to finally find in other ways. Doesn't mean I was converted. Woman, what works for me. And what works for others is valid. You, trans sister, brother, non-binary individual, all colors of the rainbow, no gender. Yeah. All you kids, out there who have a sense of who you are, like, you're valid. Know that. I know this was a tough week, so know that. That's my wish for you. I have transitioned. We all do, really, in one way or another. Maybe that's controversial to say, but again, we are not the people that we were years ago. None of us. Mine's a little more significant. Really, it's like a journey back through that aforementioned shit pile into that core, who I was born as, before people start telling you that you're someone else. I know, JK, that you don't think I'm a woman, and that you would not use she, her pronouns. And maybe you think if a teacher down the hall from me kept saying Mr., Mr., Mr. to his students, that their contract shouldn't be terminated. And you stood up for Maya and talked about that in your letter. I guess people have different opinions on that, but boy, that would affect the positive learning environment that we're trying to create at our schools. What point would you find it hard to think of me as anything but a woman, like this trans person you know? Would facial feminization be enough for you? I mean, I like wearing makeup, but I know the shape of my face. Would that be enough? I mean, this damn beard hidden under here, it keeps growing, and that sucks. Major source of dysphoria for trans women, including myself, although I've worked on that. Shout out to Alok on Facebook, A-L-O-K. I could zap it to oblivion, which I can't afford, but I don't think that would be enough for you. So what if I'm more closely aligned with the look of the stereotypically attractive cis, and that simply means not trans, not a slur, not trans, woman? What if I looked more like her? Would that help? Would that get me your she? And what about hormones, but not gender confirmation surgery? I just call bottom surgery. What if I had the bottom surgery but didn't take the hormones? What about women with all kinds of testosterone who are being questioned on whether or not they can participate in the Olympics? Now, I'm not cis women here. Do I need to grow shorter? Not be over 6 feet tall? Do I need to have a certain proportion of curves? My vocal cords need to be altered. I mean, that'd be cool. But again, I've done a lot of work, and here I am speaking to however many people listen to this out loud. Do I need to visually pass as a cis woman? I mean, is womanhood all about the looks for you? Is it all about the penis? Is that what makes me a man in your eyes? If someone cast a spell on you and you had a penis for a day, would that make you a man for that day? Would Rowling and Robert Galbraith switch places? I mean, look, I'm sorry if that mental image is traumatic for you. I really want you to understand where I'm coming from. And I have attempted to with you. I've done the reading. Another question. Do you have any trans friends? I mean, you didn't mention any. And if not, I mean, maybe one of us will invite you over to play Nintendo. Maybe. You mentioned that the woman you find it hard to think of as anything other than a woman went through a, quote, long and rigorous process and call for robust systems to slow these men from achieving gender recognition certificate. Yet WHO, the American Psychiatric Association, the DSM-5 We've all removed or are removing gender identity disorder as a recognized mental illness. I am not mentally ill. Anxiety conditions, maybe some mental illness there for sure. And that needs to be destigmatized in this world, but that's a whole other thing. So if so, do you think I should need to prove the depths of my illness and suffering in order to receive any support? Or simply the recognition of my gender from the state and from others, like an employer? And if so, does that not lead people, including trans people, to believe that to be trans is to be suffering? Beyond the suffering, of course, caused by friends and family and society that transphobia has placed on top of us. Would deeper suffering earn your she faster? Is my own path of medium suffering for a small number of years enough? Or must it be maximum suffering for all of my years? You say that trans people need and deserve protection, end quote. That you, quote, feel nothing but empathy and solidarity with trans women who've been abused by men, end quote. That you, quote, want trans women to be safe. Then you stake a position that despite all evidence to the contrary, we, women who are trans, are somehow a threat to safety in women's washrooms and changing rooms. That governments are, quote, throwing open the doors to all men who wish to come inside them. My questions, aren't those doors already open? I mean, I've been there. As scary as it is to say, and be honest, and this is new for me, and that's privilege, but I share this fear. Maybe not in a washroom, but on a dark night alone. First time I felt that fear, dressed like me, outside in the dark for the first time, felt it. God, it sucked, and again, privileged that it's new for me. I get that. I'm someone who's also at very high risk of attack. But can't men sneak into bathrooms at any time already? That's the scary part. I mean, would a man put on women's clothes to just have the opportunity to assault someone? Would a man live the life of a woman simply because it's going to increase his chance to have sex or assault someone? If you're worried that I am attracted to women, does that mean that cis lesbians should be excluded from women's spaces too? Am I safe to use the men's room or the changing room? Should I remove my makeup and dress differently whenever I am in public? Put on a costume? What about young trans girls and guys at my school? Are they safe? Are they safe in the girls' changing room with feminists who might tell them that they're dangerous predators or misguided girls? What if cis boys and young men in changing rooms been reading or watching online? Do they see a liar who is eroding the position of so-called real women in the world? Will they beat up a young trans girl to defend your position that it's not a real girl? Will they think they are attracted to a guy? This is a big one. When a heterosexual male is attracted to me, that's not a sign of that person being gay. That is a hetero relationship. And some men are attracted to me, are attracted to trans women. Look at the porn numbers. But this often leads to attacks. There are a lot of reasons for that. which I don't need to go into here. But it's really not safe for a trans woman to be in men's spaces sometimes. How would you feel? How do you feel that your words are contributing to this culture? Another question. I know, lots of questions. Again, teacher. Would you say that trans guys and men aren't real men? Are they women in your view because they have or have had vaginas? What about those that have been traumatized themselves and share men's rooms with cis guys? Do you see them as predators? Victims? And what does that say about the gender cliches that you have? I mean, trans guys have some pretty fabulous beards and rippling muscles that could be epic from time to time. I mean, where are you on that? You've really only been talking about trans women. Next question, how often do you see other people's genitals in safe spaces? And why? Lastly, you may have read this in the news. When Liam Neeson first heard about the sexual assault of his friends, he was understandably furious. And this is what he said, later in an interview. He said, quote, "I went up and down areas with a cosh, hoping I would be approached by somebody. I'm ashamed to say that. And I did it for maybe a week, hoping some black bastard would come out of a pub and have a go at me about something, so that I could kill him." End quote. How does this response make you feel? I think that's enough for now. Empathizing with your pain isn't hard. I mean, only despicable people would fail to feel compassion for a sexual assault survivor or a violent threat receiver. But empathizing with the fear and pain of my trans and non-binary students, their rainbow friends, and their peers across the globe, many of whom are actually locked down with parents and siblings that misgender and mock and assault them, possibly also now referencing an open letter from their Harry Potter hero, because launching into some conversion therapy will then be next in these households. It is not safe. That's my pain today, and it obviously pales in comparison to theirs. Are you sharing some of that? Will you? When the violence comes for those kids? For a trans girl? Which gendered shelter would you like her to go to? Will we all learn a little bit more together? I sincerely hope so. Your former fan, trans activist, Gryffindor. Happy Pride Month, everyone.